All right, I believe we are live. Hello, everybody. Sorry to people watching live for the late start here. 8:14, not bad. Okay, and I'm excited, Brian. We haven't done this in a little while. I feel like it's always weird around May when we go from like podcasting every single week of the season and short shifts and like I'm doing Match Maximizer. Then all of a sudden, just like, whoa, I felt like kind of like bad, Brian. Like I'm doing something like I haven't been podcasting as if like I'm like a religious person who hasn't gone to their like place of worship recently, and you're like, oh, I guess I really need to go. I feel like guilty about it.
It's the guilt.
Yeah, I feel guilty that I was like, it's been so long since we did, and the last one was like a cheat. We did like a patron cast and then dropped that as an episode.
That's true.
I feel like we're sweet.
I don't know. You have some repenting to do.
Oh, hopefully I did a lot of prep for this episode. I hope that will count as that. Well, I hope that'll be okay. And then, but we'll get going soon with that. It's like we've been doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes, by the way, for the patrons, because the video is only eventually we release it to the public. But also, anyways, whatever. To the patrons and to, I guess, the world, we're doing a lot of behind the scenes stuff to set up for Cupful next season. At some point, we're going to have a really fun announcement to share, potentially. But,
Hope so.
Hope so. We'll try.
So cool.
We're going to start opening. I thought we were going to start registration like pretty soon. Should do that.
Didn't we say when the cup was like the day after the Stanley Cup is
We said
awarded?
that?
I think so.
I don't remember anything I say. I said
know.
something else. I said that I was going to try to get my
I know
prototype
this from
done by
working
the
with you.
cup.
Yeah.
Okay, we could do a lot of things on that day. But I think we can start registration anytime. Just make sure to get people's time zones in the
good to have like a
registration
momentous moment to do it.
All right.
Just
But anyway, let's knock out
a
this show. We got a
landmark.
lot of fun. Yeah. Shams is here. And who else is here? We got 3 eyeballs, according to StreamYard. So
well,
look at
Shams
us.
just posted 2. Are you counting those?
Shams just posted 2. Oh, I get it. That's funny. Okay, I put it up on the screen here. Do you know that, Brian, we can do private chat in here?
You just wow. Elon took that chat real private by leaving the stream. I don't
Oh
know
no,
if
I
he's-
pressed a button to do something and then I left. I hope that's not going to
Did
mess
you-
up the recording.
Did you go to private chat?
Yeah, I went to private
Go to
chat
private
and
chat
then
with me? Did you put yourself in like a breakout room or something?
I just hope that I didn't mess up the recording, but I guess whatever.
Do you need to well, we have the YouTube audio.
Love the YouTube. Yeah,
You
so
always
then
have
just
the
let's
YouTube
not talk
audio.
over each other, just in case. On the recording tab now, it says uploading. But I guess we're just always uploading, right? That's not like all of a sudden it's uploading. Yours says low disk space, of course.
Oh, again, it's unreasonable why. I have so much disk space. It's not my fault.
Okay,
That's
All right,
StreamYard's fault.
let's do
Chris
this.
mentioned, and that it does make me feel better. He says, "Yeah, you put July has more fancy relevant content." I agree. Like this is really, like when we talk about the summer months for hockey, there is fantasy relevant stuff. I would say actually, like the playoffs are the biggest fantasy hockey dead zone of the year.
Well, you wait till you hear what I came up with for today. I got
On
some
that
good
note.
stuff. On that note, all right, here we go. You ready? Now you
Yeah,
can't sigh
I got my
Wow.
big sigh out. I can't sigh while you're talking.
because
on
I might
mic.
not be able to
I'll mute
mute
myself.
that.
I'm gonna sigh while you're saying your intro. And
Okay.
I want you to tell me if you can
Good to
hear
know.
it with your eyes.
Okay. Oh, I didn't even think of what I'm going to say. Hosted by 2 guys who what? Oh, I got one. Got like a jerky one. Okay, fine.
What's the jerky one?
I don't know, like, oh, 2
Who you
guys we're
being a
going to
jerk
spend the
to?
whole time talking about why the Leafs lost. I don't know, some joke like that. Then
what?
haha, sarcasm, just JK. You've heard it. I don't know.
Nah.
Is that a good one?
And I don't think Leafs fans
Oh,
need that.
Leafs
in the
fired Sheldon
moment.
Keefe. So, hosted by 2 guys. Who
What
unlike
about we
NHL coaches who would be the longest tenured NHL coach. Okay, I got one. Okay, I'll do that. Okay. Just let me go. All right. Yes! Welcome everybody to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by 2 guys who have been tenured on this podcast more than any NHL coach by like so long. Like if we were coaching an NHL team for as long as we've been doing this podcast, we'd be like Hall of Famers I'm your host, Dylan Dubrovsky, and with me to talk about everything that's gone on since the start of the NHL playoffs and try to glean any fantasy relevance that we can, it is the Poobah Prognostication, the IPP MVP, the fantasy hockey robot himself, Brian Kahn. Brian, how's it going?
Hey, I am good. It's nice. It's been so long since we've done like an actual episode. We're so happy to be back on the mic. And Elon, like I'm thinking about this coaching thing you're saying, and like I wonder if our listeners were the GM, if they could have fired us at any point,
if they
would
would
they have? Like our
Yeah.
NHL teams, is is our shelf life actually longer than an NHL coach, or is there just nobody to fire us?
Yeah, that's a good point. According to some of the reviews we've gotten on iTunes over the years, I definitely know that we would have gotten some calls to be fired for some really, relevant and important reasons, like our voices are bad, or, we said that your favorite team is not that good, or something along those lines.
But thank you
whatever.
for like these
We're still here.
several hundred positive reviews, like that far, far, far out number. Like
I don't remember any of
100 to
those.
1.
I just remember
if
the
you
bad
want
ones.
Elon to remember you, leave him a bad review.
Well, don't leave a. We once got a 1-star
Email
review
it, okay?
being like,
just email it. Don't let anyone else see it.
we once got a 1-star review that was like, have there been new episodes? I haven't seen any. 1 star. And it was like, there had been. I think their like podcast app just wasn't working or something. It was like, anyway. All right.
There's no way to, you can reply on Google Maps. I wonder what our replies would be. If we could, would you be like a restaurant owner reply guy or small business owner reply guy if we had like public facing Google Maps,
so.
Google reviews that we could respond to?
Because then everyone can see my
It's rarely
rebuttal.
a good look.
Oh, I see. Okay, well, I'll run it by you. But anyways, we got too much to get to, Brian, so that hopefully everyone enjoyed this little pre-show banter. But here we are. We're live with the patrons, and everyone else is going to hear this the next day. But yeah, here's the plan. We've got 4 playoff series going on right now. As we speak, we're in the second round. The Panthers and the Bruins are done 2 periods of Game 4. Boston's up 2-1. We're just going to talk about the 4 series that are still going on. See, look at the stats, see which player. Like my goal always in the playoffs is like Brian has this big thing where he's like, nothing in the playoffs matters. For I'm exaggerating, but like don't pay too much attention in terms of for fantasy and thinking about next year. And I'm always trying to find like, but what? I just want to find 1 or 2 things that maybe has changed our minds about a player. From the end of the season to now, going into drafts for next year. So I'm going to basically be pitching Brian on different players that have done stuff in the playoffs and see if I could get him to crack on anyone and say, okay, you're right. I'm a little higher on this guy now. Yeah, I'm a little lower on this guy now. So that's like my challenge, and we'll see how I do. Brian, how confident are you that I'll be able to get you on at least one?
Well, if I say not confident at all, someone like would people stop listening? Like, should I say, "Oh, there might be one"?
I feel confident that I can get one. So just because you say, like, I trust your integrity that you're not going to purposely, just say
Well, of course
you're
I'm
not
gonna.
Yeah.
It would be great if I had. You know what? I can see a couple, but I think one of them I've already been talking about. So, let's go through. Let's find out together.
Okay. Of course, Keeping Karlsson proudly presented by DobberHockey.com. They've got great content going all through the playoffs, all through the summer, all through the season. It's the best. Check it out. Dobber Hockey. I use frozen tools to prep the show. Before we get into the playoffs, the one other interesting thing that's happened in the NHL recently is they had the draft lottery. San Jose Sharks. I'm wearing their hat. Macklin Celebrini is going to be a Shark. Pretty huge for them. I recall last year, so much of the summer conversation was like where to draft Connor Bedard in drafts, how our players like Taylor Hall and whoever affected, I don't know, Andreas Athanasiou, Seth Jones, all the people, there's a lot of interest around, now that this big name is coming, like how does that affect him for drafts and all the players around him? Like, I look at the Sharks. On one hand, you can be like, there's nobody there. On the other hand, guys like Granlund, Zetterlund, even Eklund to some extent were like doing pretty well at the end of the season and were definitely worth rostering. Who knows if Logan Couture is still around next year? So it's not like there's completely nobody. I'm just curious. it does Celebrini, is he going to become like the sure like top pick on this team? Would you rather go with someone safer like Granlund? Does this hurt? Does it help? I'm just trying to get your just a general sense, and obviously we'll talk about this a little more in the off season. But I'm just your current sense of like how this affects your thoughts on the Sharks, and of course Celebrini himself. How high would you be drafting him?
Yeah, I would like congrats to San Jose. Kind of a boring lottery, but they're not going to complain. And yeah, I guess the question is how long till Macklin Celebrini, or as he's known on HockeyDB, Mac, is relevant. I think there's not a whole lot going on in San Jose, but you do have like William Eklund and Fabian Zetterlund who are sort of coming on. You've got Logan Couture. And already, honestly, with those three, I think Celebrini has more around him than Bedard had around him. Like Bedard, we would have said like Taylor Hall, and that's about it. And even Taylor Hall wasn't actually a force there. So, and then you have like Zadina, who I think is probably like a middle six guy. So I shouldn't count him, even though I still I'm hoping maybe he's got something more to show from his draft type. You've got Sebastian Bordeleau, Will Smith, who's developing too. The thing is that no one on defense in San Jose seems to be good. And so, like, somebody needs to get the puck up. And I think that's a bit of a problem for the Sharks and for anybody playing forward on the Sharks. You've got Shakir Mukhamadullin, but I'm not sure. Like, I guess he'll be there. But how many is he going to play 25 minutes a night? And if he does, great. But what about the other 35 minutes of most games? And apropos of nothing, just while we're talking about the Sharks prospect pool, remember Ozzy Weisblatt? Like he was supposed to be, like he was a late first round, I think, like 31st overall pick of the Sharks. And I feel like I remember him having a lot of hype on him. Maybe he just had a memorable name. I was looking him up to see where he's at. Do you know he has 4 siblings named Ocean, Orca, Oasis, and Oceania. And both his parents are also deaf, so they all know ASL.
Okay, you're learning a lot, Brian, researching these Sharks prospects. There are some other names. Like this team should be good. Like the problem, you're right about the defense. There's not much at D, but like they also have this guy Quentin Musty, who I know people say is going to be really good. Like being in a dynasty league, Brian, basically I know everything now about prospects, as you can clearly tell. There's a guy Philip Beested, who I know is a high pedigree guy. On defense, you've got Henry Thrun, who maybe will at some point make an impact along with Makamudulin. So they could be good at some point, but yeah, I don't know if it's going to be next year. I think it'll be really fun. I guess like usual, I wouldn't be reaching high for a Macklin Celebrini, but
yeah,
well, definitely I wouldn't leave him undrafted just because it would be fun to have him and see how it goes. But I think still, you listed a bunch of guys. You didn't even mention Granlund, who to me was like one of the MVPs of my what's it called? The
consolation run?
Consolation playoffs that I won in Cupful. He was one of my top guys.
I didn't mean to leave him out. Thanks for catching that. There was also this interesting article at The Athletic by Corey Pronman where he gathered like votes from like NHL front office types and said like, where does Celebrini rank amongst the last 10 number 1 picks? And they have Celebrini like right in the like basically. He's right on. So you've got McDavid, Bedard, Matthews, Hughes were the top 4. Then you've got Celebrini. And after that, it's Dahlin, Power, Hischier, Lafreniere, and Slavkovsky. So he's kind of like right in the middle, right? Like, will he be the 5th game breaker of the group? Or will he just be like the top of the 6 guys who are like still good and worth their draft stock? Although the jury's still out on a couple, of course. But still like not gonna blow away. Like I know from that list, like I want any of those top 4 guys in my fantasy hockey draft first round, and then the rest, I'll get somewhere between the 2nd and the 4th or 5th round. So I'm not going to be the one to pick Celebrini this year unless he falls like pretty far. And I guess we still have to wait and see how quickly he's going to be put in the lineup. Like also with a team like this, and because he's not quite Connor Bedard, I also wonder, like, how, like, what's the use, right? Like, what's going to be the plan here? Is he better going straight to the NHL or developing a little more? So there's a lot to think about. I'm excited to see where he fits in and how he does. It would be fun if he joined those the McDavid, Bedard, Matthews, Hughes group.
Yeah. And of course, we remember Jack Hughes took him a little while to join that group. But once he joined, he's been bonkers. Yeah, and I guess we'll also see what the Sharks do in the offseason. Maybe they can get a defenseman. I don't know what the plan is. Are they just going to tank another year? Maybe they'll try to get some decent players. We'll see what happens. Like last year, Arizona picked up some decent players in the offseason that helped them get it, a little bit step higher than bottom of the league, playing for first overall. So we'll see. But okay, so that's the Sharks talk. Let's get into the playoffs. And I guess where should we start here? Well, you know what? You mentioned Lafreniere in that list of first round picks, and he's someone who was looking like not too great for his first few seasons, but holy cow, what a breakout this year. We talked about it a lot during the season, Lafreniere, and how he was really coming on, especially in the second half of the year. He actually didn't even have that great of a first half. He was like around half point per game, but like he ended the season with 18 points in his last 20 games, and he's continued it into the playoffs for sure. 7 points in his last 5 games now. We're looking at 10 points in 8 games overall for the Rangers, obviously fitting in very, very well with Artemi Panarin. Maybe you could say hard not to, but still, Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere has been probably the top line. Zibanejad, Kreider, and you know, Jack Roslovic has been the third on that other line with Zibanejad and Kreider. But anyways, Lafreniere, goals in 3 straight now. The Rangers are currently up 3-1. Carolina staved. Man, I can't talk. Oh, I'll just do an edit point. Right, I'm doing a podcast. Okay. Carolina staved off elimination in that last game. But yeah, that's the big name for me that I feel like I wonder if maybe just seeing Lafreniere continue to do well in the playoffs like he did at the end of last season, is this maybe moving the needle for you a little bit? Where maybe, he ended the season with, what was it? And again, it was like really a tale of 2 seasons, but you look at his total, and Lafreniere ended with 57 points, and I think we would have already been projecting him for closer to like 65, maybe like, I don't know, 65 to 70. Tell me if I'm wrong. I wonder, do these playoffs move him up a little bit? 75. He's still not on the top power play, but it's not stopping him from being well above a point per game in these playoffs so far, playing with Panarin and Trocheck.
Yeah, and Lafreniere is the guy I was alluding to already, who I think I've been talking up for most of the season. And I do think that his playoff production is a sign of things to come. Now, can it really come exactly this way? I'm not so sure. He's got 4 goals on his last 13 shots, and before that, Lafreniere had only taken 9 shots over 5 games. So he picked up 5 assists in that time, which is great. And now that Lafreniere is shooting, he's scoring. So I'd like to see more of that. Without that top power play time, I think it's still going to be a challenge for Lafreniere to really enter, really break through. But I think it's at least time to consider him capable of hanging with some of those really great PP2 top 6 guys of the past. I know Nick Ehlers is not in everyone's good books at the moment, but Nick Ehlers is one of them. Timo Meier was one of them at one point too. And I think Lafreniere is entering that territory as being an extremely productive, someone who's going to be really productive. And the only thing stopping him from going all the way and being a top tier fantasy performer is that lack of top power play time. But otherwise, yeah, I love that he's shooting more. He had a great regular season. He picked up steam as he went. He lost a little just at the end. But it's great, honestly, scoring 4 goals in key games, crucial moments against Carolina, and shooting at will. It seems, like I said, 13 shots for Lafreniere over his last 3 games against a very defensively skilled team in Carolina. That's good news.
Yeah, and I guess another player I'll just bring up quickly over on the Rangers, Adam Fox. I mean, okay, keep in mind, I'm going to bring up some stat lines, Brian. I don't want people to think that just because I'm bringing it up, I feel like this is something that I think is noteworthy for next year. I just, bring it up for conversation. I'll just say right off the bat, I'm not worried about Adam Fox for next year, even though he only has 4 points in 8 playoff games so far. But it is noteworthy for people who drafted Adam Fox in their playoff pools. I think they were hoping for a little bit more after a 70-plus point regular season. I assume this is not something that you're especially concerned about.
No,
obviously,
and I think through the theme through this episode is going to be grain of salt everywhere, right? You have guys who are playing injured. That's going to impact things too. You're playing against the best. The further you go into the playoffs, the harder your competition is. So you might be less effective. So I'm actually gonna I would put less weight in a cold streak down the stretch as I would a hot streak down the stretch, right? Because you're tired, you're playing against top competition. and you're crushing it, and that would actually move the needle more. Like I'm looking more for those positive pieces than saying, oh, this guy's not doing a whole lot, so I'm not gonna I'm gonna drop him a notch. Like for me, the best outcome of this is if people remember Adam Fox as being ineffective in the playoffs or not as effective as they would have liked, then he falls a little further in the draft. But I really,
Hey,
really like. I think that's
unlikely.
unlikely with Fox. I think I'm just looking at his power play usage, and I'm seeing that it's down. And I think it's more like a function of the Rangers seeming to be splitting units lately against Carolina. They seem to be kind of going with a more even approach with Fox on unit number 1. And then you've got Truba and Gustafsson playing on the second unit with, I guess, Roslovic, Wenberg, and Lafreniere. So I don't think they'll keep
I
splitting.
think it's only been like a few power plays. I think that's a very small sample size
Okay,
of
all
power
right.
plays. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's the thing also in the playoffs with power plays. Like there aren't as well. Actually, that's a bit of a misconception. But maybe as the playoffs go on, there's like fewer power plays. But anyway, the first goal today for the Panthers against Boston, or for the Boston against the Panthers, was a power play goal, Jake DeBrusk. But we're not talking about them. We'll talk about them later. With Adam Fox, I'm thinking like when you were talking about Adam Fox potentially going down in people's draft boards and that being a win for you. I'd imagine the same can be said, I'll say right now, like Roman Josi only had 3 points in 6 games for Nashville in that series against Vancouver. That would be pretty sweet if Josi falls down draft boards. Obviously, again, not something to be too
It's not
concerned
gonna
about.
happen. Like
Yeah.
people have like recency bias is a thing, but I don't think people include like bad playout. Like I really don't think people could. Yeah, will.
Well, okay,
I'm
let me give you.
interested. Be an
Can I throw one at
interesting
you?
Study. Yeah, throw one.
I mean, I think in Vegas, maybe you can make a claim that these playoff performances might tip the needle for next year. Shea Theodore, no points in 7 games in that, game 7 loss to Dallas. Pietrangelo, only 1 assist in the 7 games. The defenseman who was on the top power play and getting all the points was Noah Hannafin, who had 5 points in his 7 games with Vegas. I feel like I'm for sure a little, and by a little I mean a lot, more nervous about Theodore and Pietrangelo next year because Hannafin's now signed to this big long-term contract. We just saw a playoff series where Theodore and Pietrangelo did nothing and lost that power play role. I don't know. Like, I feel like for me, maybe Shea Theodore really does tumble, and maybe that could end up being like really huge value if you get Shea Theodore as like a defenseman, like the 14th round of your cupful draft, and then he ends up being great for you. But I'd also be worried that maybe this is a sign of things to come, where maybe he's been overtaken, or like I said, like that things could quickly change, and Theodore could be the biggest steal.
Yeah, I like it. Well, sorry. Let me take that again. I was just off mic. Do you have a list of? I was just trying to find Vegas's when they Vegas's injuries.
Well, go to game day tweets. The best I would do is go to game day tweets and click on Vegas, like news, and then
Right.
click on Vegas and kind of see.
I'll probably
what
there
you
might
can
be a
find there.
tweet that's nothing. There's nothing there since they were eliminated, except a Chris Tanev tweet.
William Karlsson had a hamstring injury. Mark Stone says he believes injured spleen is behind him. Okay, anyway.
Confirmed surgery. Oh, okay, there it is. That's the tweet I was looking for.
Oh, yeah, lots of
Okay.
surgeries. Oh, that's a good one to bring up.
All right.
Yeah.
One thing I'll mention before we go ahead and make any pronouncements here, and also, by the way, though, your point is taken, right? Like Theodore was bad, but part of the change isn't just that he was doing what he getting all the same deployment. Like he was usurped, right? Power play 1 role was taken from him, and so that we have to take in. Adam Fox is not losing his deployment, so there's one difference there.
Right, of course.
But also for Shea Theodore and Alex Pietrangelo, they both had surgeries this year. They were in this very long list of surgeries that Bruce Cassidy shared that took place through the year. Mark Stone, Pietrangelo, Eichel, Shea Theodore, Tomas Hertl. Does that count? Like, you had the surgery as a shark? Come on. William Carrier.
Well, I think it's an excuse for the playoffs.
Right,
We lost because this guy was coming off surgery.
No, for sure. That is the right way to take it. And Zach Whitecloud. So, I don't know. I mean, Cassidy did follow up by saying that they were all that they got healthy at the right time. So I'm not sure if Theodore was 100% or hadn't fully recovered, and same for Pietrangelo. So all of that is like it is worth considering. But you know what? Picking the Vegas power play quarterback has been hard for a long time, right? Like Pietrangelo and Theodore, like it's always supposed to have been Theodore, but Pietrangelo has been like pretty stubbornly holding on, and then it's been 50-50, and then Shea Theodore had a good run the year before this. And when I say last year, I'm not sure if it's clear anymore, but like the year before this current one, Theodore had a nice little run, especially to end the year. So where does this leave us? I truly don't know. I wish I could tell you. I think at least it's a flag, right? On draft day, it's like, oh well, Shea Theodore wasn't quarterbacking the top unit. Neither was Pietrangelo. That means either one could be vulnerable. Hannafin is about to get paid over $7 million for the next how many years is it?
8 seasons. He got the full thing.
8 seasons. Wow. Yeah, Vegas like really liked him really quickly, I guess.
I mean, he's been a stud defenseman in the league for a long time, and he's also really proved himself over in Vegas. I think that just switching over to Hannafin himself, he's gonna be like he's gonna be like the Mike Matheson, I think, of this year's draft. I don't know about not in terms of the results. We'll have to wait and see, of course. But I feel like he's gonna be the guy that everyone is like, this is my sleeper pick for the draft. Except then like so many people are gonna be saying it that he's no longer a sleeper anymore because everyone's gonna be reaching for him because they know that that's like there's a new top power play defenseman that no one really knows about that he could be really good this year. And then like it really worked out well for the people who went for Matheson, and we'll find out if it'll be the same for Hannafin. But I think he's gonna be a guy that's on a lot of lists. The NHL.com top draft sleepers.
Oh, for sure.
I feel like Noah Hannafin will be there.
And like Yahoo.com, like everything that shows up in the sidebar, everything that shows up in the sidebar of your fantasy sports site will Noah Hannafin will be there. But again, like I don't know. Vegas is happy to split power plays. They're happy to like change things. So I'm not gonna like get overly locked in on any of these guys, but I think the presence of Hannafin is definitely one more reason to not draft Theodore or Pietrangelo, with the hope that I think they have the inside track on the job, because now it's I would say it's likely to be Theodore or Hannafin going forward, and maybe they swap and change, or Theodore, like two of them play on the second unit, whatever. It's just more reason to avoid, but I wouldn't say that Theodore's performance is like the full reason to avoid, right? Like, he was pointless. Pietrangelo had 1 point. That's not good. Hannafin had 5 points in 7 games. 3 of them came on the power play. Hannafin also had 2 game-winning goals, right? And I actually feel like that might stick, right? I feel like having those like clutch goals, the goals that turn out to be the most important or memorable of the game because of their gravity, might also help him get a job into the next year and that contract.
All right, so we were talking about the Rangers, then I totally veered off into some D-talk. But let's go back to the Rangers series against Carolina and continue the defenseman talk, because we could talk about how Brent Burns was probably the defenseman that was drafted highest in most playoff pools, and he's been pretty blah. 4 points in 9 games now. The guy that's exploding is Brady Shea, who I believe is a pending unrestricted free agent. So he's probably earning himself some money with each of the. Probably wouldn't be so bad for Brady Shea if like Carolina just loses their next game, and so he doesn't have a chance to bring down his points per game, because he's at 8 points in 9 games right now in the playoffs. Doing really well. I feel like it's no point, diving too deep into what we expect from Shea next season, just because we don't even know what team he'll be on. But huge for him. And Brent Burns, I think maybe his draft stock is continuing to fall next year. He already was like losing top power play for a lot of this season. So I think there's just more reason to be concerned about Brent Burns. And Brady Shea is going to get a big contract, I think. I actually asked in the patron Discord who's going to get a bigger contract next. I actually asked in the patron Discord who's going to get a bigger contract next year between Shea and Montour. And I think that'll be a fun thing to track, because that's another UFA who's actually doing really well right now after, Montour was stinking for a lot of this season after coming back from his injury, but 2 straight multi-point games for him. But Elon, we'll get to the Florida series later. Sticking with Carolina, that concludes my defense talk on the series. And the other name I just want to throw out to you, Brian, for Carolina, Andrei Svechnikov is having himself a playoffs. He's up to now 9 points in 9 games. He's really done well in this most recent series, 4 points in his last 3. I made it to the second round of the KKPP, the Keeping Karlsson playoff pool. So we were redrafting for each round. And I had, in the 4th round, I think it was, I took Seth Jarvis, even though Svechnikov was on the board. Kind of regretting that now. I could have like 4 or 5 more points.
Yeah, and well, actually, I want to throw that back at you because like Jarvis has been, I think, a bit of a revelation this year. Like I've always been sort of reluctant to say that Jarvis is really great and you can count on him. But this year, almost a 70-point pace, took a couple shots a night. His shooting percentage was like maybe a touch high, but he also might just be an efficient converter. So I'll have to wait and see. But basically, like top power play time through the season helped, 20 power play points on the year. And so if he can hold that, then, I'm not going to buy into this. But I'm wondering, Elon, Seth, and like you have your rule about you want players who have done it for more than 1 year. Right? Like you don't want them to be new to having been established.
Well,
so Jarvis has done it for 1 year. He's 22 years old. He's now a little cold in the playoffs. Are you thrown at all by what you're seeing from Jarvis?
good question. Okay, so first of all, just for context, Jarvis had an amazing series against the Islanders. Did really well. He's just basically now pointless in 3. And when I look at like the things that I like to look at, like, still huge time on ice, still top power play, still taking shots. So I think if this was in the middle of the regular season, we were talking about this on the podcast, we'd be like, don't worry about Seth Jarvis. He'll be fine. He's playing with Aho. But as far as my like, just to clarify, when I say like I was talking about more like for someone that I'm going to take with like a super high pick, like a 1st or 2nd round pick, I want to have more of a sure thing that I know is going to be like an elite guy, and I got a little bit burned by Tage Thompson this past season. That's where that conversation came up, where I used my 1st round pick to take Tage Thompson when I could have had like Barkov or, just like whatever, like someone who's been a stud for a long time. But Seth Jarvis, for a young early 1st round picks. I don't know, Brian, I know you have like a big cutoff of like 1st round picks. 13th overall, does that count to you as that's a lottery pick, right? 13th? I think that counts as pretty high pedigree. No?
Well, yeah, no, I think you're still like
whatever.
It really
Okay, that's
dips
nitpicking.
after like 8 or 9 or 10. Like that's when you dip, but 13 is still better than 20.
Okay.
You're still on
anyway,
that steep down. Yeah.
I would expect that Seth Jarvis was gonna like have his career be like have one really good season at some point early on, and then build on that or maintain that. So I think there's a reasonable expectation that Jarvis should be able to continue being a 70-ish point guy. Maybe even he could take another step forward. But yeah, I wouldn't use like a super early pick on him because there's definitely risk there. We've only seen one really good year, but I'm not like too concerned. But also, I don't think he's the kind of guy that anyone's going to be drafting. If you could get him as like, I'd rather probably there's other 70-point guys I'd rather take. But if he's falling to 65-point guys, then I'd go for him. By the way, Shams is correcting me. I guess Carolina's obviously been shaking up their lines because they lost those first 3 games, and so most recently the top line was Aho, Gensel, and Svechnikov, which is very bad for Jarvis, right? That moved him to the Teravainen and Stahl line. So that's another concern with Carolina players in general when you're drafting them in fantasy is you can't bank on those lines. Well, obviously, we'll see what happens. Gensel won't be there next year, potentially. Does that answer your question, Brian? I know I just rambled for a long time.
It sounds like you're saying like he's not a high stakes enough pick that you're gonna like avoid him, and you're not gonna take a whole lot away from him, like because he played well against the Islanders. He's still on the top power play. You don't like that his deployment has changed for the moment.
But everyone's deployment changes.
Yeah,
on
like Carolina
lost
all the time, and Carolina lost 3 in a row to the Rangers. Like it wasn't working. So yeah, that makes sense. That since Seth Jarvis is not so my follow up, Elon, is if you're looking at Seth Jarvis, who 68-point pace, and you're looking at I'll just throw it like a stereotype, and Seth Jarvis is 22 years old, and you're looking at a guy who is going to get you 60 to 65 points, but he's like 31 years old, but he's done it for like 5 years in a row.
Then give me Seth Jarvis.
You'll take Jarvis.
Because also this is like later on in the draft where I wanted to have a chance to win here. Like
I don't think it's going to be that that much later on.
I guess
And
that'll be
for
fun. We'll find out when we do our mock drafts where Seth
yeah,
Jarvis is going.
and for the
I
record,
think
like
I thought the question you were going to ask is like Svechnikov versus Jarvis because he was really disappointing for stretches during the season and even for the first round of the playoffs. And that's why I took Jarvis ahead of him. But now Svechnikov really coming on. But again, this is such a small sample size, and Svechnikov is a high pedigree guy.
And for what it's worth, like Jarvis was bumped around a little bit in the season. Like he was playing with Jordan Martinook and Jared Stahl for a solid like 20 game stretch. And I assume he still that might be something to dig into a little deeper in the offseason to see how much moving away from Aho hurt him then. Speaking of Svechnikov, he's been kind of uneven, huh? Like even as he's doing better, it's great because we know Svechnikov has this gear and we need him to remind us that he has it. But it seems like through nine playoff games so far, in all but one, he's registered either 6 shots on goal, 2 shots on goal, or 0. And like, I just don't understand. I don't understand it. Like, wouldn't you think like there'd be some sort of place where Svechnikov would like settle and regularly shoot? And the answer is like, unsurprisingly with this guy, no. It's hard, that's the frustration, right? So Jarvis feels a little steadier to me at this point, but the upside for Svechnikov seems higher. Like he seems a little more in control of his own fate, regardless of where he lands. And at the top, you mentioned Brady Shea, who's like attempting more shots over during the playoff run. He's more involved in 5-on-5 scoring, probably a little too involved, which contributes to where he's at. But yeah, no, he's going to get a big contract next year. And I'll give a shout out to Evolving Wild, or Evolving, I guess it's Evolving-Hockey is their website, because they have contract projections. They're for subscribers, so I'm not going to break the paywall for anyone here, but they have contract projections. And they're very helpful and interesting to think about. And they have a pretty great track record, too, with it's even just great to talk about. So, but Shea's probably going to get paid in the offseason. And who knows if Carolina can find the space somehow. And then going back, Brent Burns, he had I think over the course of the season, when we talked about Brent Burns, I had never fully given up on him until I just couldn't not, because it had just been a while that he hadn't been doing well. I think here's the thing with Brent Burns. He's playing 19 minutes a night in San Jose. Then last year, his first in Carolina, he had played 17 minutes a night. This year, he was down to 15 and a half minutes a night at 5-on-5. Those were all 5-on-5 numbers. So that's going to take away some opportunity to produce for Burns, but still his production per 60 minutes this season was awful at 5-on-5. It was the worst 5-on-5 production Brent Burns has had since his sophomore season in Minnesota, which was still 2 or 3 years before his breakout as a great offensive defenseman in San Jose. But his numbers still look decent under the hood. There was some really bad variance and there's lower minutes, but if the variance sort of evens out and Brent Burns can hold on to a top power play role, which we don't know because he's seen a decreased power play role in these playoffs, I think he still could be relevant, but I think you're drafting him as your third. And if you're lucky, I think he'd be a great 4th defenseman pick if you can get him there. I think he's probably more likely someone you have to draft early enough to be your 3rd defenseman. And I'd still take a chance on Brent Burns there.
Sorry, 1 second. The hell?
Are you okay?
okay. Yeah, sorry, my headphones just went out for a second.
Oh, okay.
But my mistake. Okay. Cool. I'll just respond. Yeah, I'm definitely lower on Burns. Maybe, I guess we'll see. There might be something there. He's getting so old. But anyways, we should probably move on. I do have the Evolving Hockey contract projections up, and I guess the rules are we're not supposed to. I'll just say that they've got Brady Shea in line for a really big payday. So bigger than Brandon Montour. So I'll throw that out there. Also, looking at these free agents, this is going to be a really crazy summer, eh? Reinhart, Gensel, Stamkos, all UFAs. Huge superstars out there. It'll be fun to see where they all go. But okay, Brian, let's take a break. And when we come back, we can talk about these 3 other playoff series and some of these other teams that we lost along the way. Can you believe we've done a hockey podcast about the playoffs and haven't even mentioned the Leafs yet? We'll do that at some point. But let's take a break. We'll be back in just a sec. It's going to keep it Karlsson. All right, we are back, Brian. Let's jump over to the Colorado Dallas series. This has been a very fun series so far. Obviously, Colorado totally destroyed Winnipeg in the first round. Now they're down 2-1, but like the big three just exploding, right? McKinnon, Rantanen, and Makar all with 12 points in 8 games. For anyone who was like, oh, should I take a defenseman in the first round of the KKPP? Like anyone who got Makar, like very excited with the production they've got. Uh, I- the guy that I'm like so interested in and trying to figure out for next year is Valerie Nichushkin, who had such a weird season. Like he started a little bit slow. He wasn't even on the top power play, if you recall. But then what was it? Like Lehkonen got injured. Nichushkin got on the top power play, got on like the top line for stretches and just like exploded. And then he had to go to the player assistance program, but he came back and he was great. Anyways, Nichushkin now having a great playoffs, 10 points in 8 games. This is a guy who, like, going into this season, I think a lot of us, like, we expected him to be for real. Like, he had been someone who had broken out the year before. Like 2 seasons ago, Nichushkin had 47 points in 53 games. That's a 73-point pace. And the season before that, he had like a 70-ish point pace. And so I think we were all like expecting, yeah, he'll be a 70-ish point guy. But now going into well, I mean, we still obviously it's tricky also because like these playoffs are still going. We'll see how the rest of it goes. But I'm seeing Nichushkin as more of like a 85. Like I don't know. Like am I too high on Valerie Nichushkin? I feel like he's going to be someone who maybe will be a bit of a steal. Like you look at his totals for this season. You see 53 points in 54 games for an 80-point pace. I think a lot of models. You look at Domnich's model. He'll probably have him lower than point per game since he looks at just like the last few years. But I just feel like when Nichushkin is healthy and in the roster spot that I think he's going to occupy, he just explodes. Like, and we're seeing it in the playoffs this year.
Yeah, he seems pretty locked in to like Nichushkin to where we want to see him in the lineup, and I think that's ultimately like that's been the question in Colorado. But that question, and I don't know if that question gets answered like with the playoff run. But Nichushkin was fantastic this year. At 5-on-5, he played a little more often, which helped. His per 60 production didn't change a whole lot. He just played another 60 seconds, so that helped him rack up enough minutes to put up more points. I don't think he had like any crazy variance. It's really on the power play where Nichushkin had 21 points in 54 games, which over a full season would come out to 32 power play points, that's high end. Like it's not highest end power play contribution, but it is high end. And I also don't see why he wouldn't be able to keep that up. And Nichushkin, his power play contributions have held up in the playoffs. Like on that top unit in Colorado, you're in great shape, right? So Elon, I'm with you. I don't know if he's going to be like so under the radar though. Like I'm not sure you're going to sneak Valerie Nichushkin sooner than you should, especially depending on how deep Colorado goes into the playoffs. He started the playoffs with the 7-game goal scoring streak, and then that streak was snapped when Nichushkin took no shots. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So Nichushkin missed them all that night. But Nichushkin has also scored on 38% of the shots he has taken these playoffs. 9 goals on 24 shots, just a single assist, but big power play contributions, 4 power play goals. And yeah, like I'm all in on Nichushkin. I see point per game plus being a possibility, and you might be able to he might be one. I hear what you're saying, and maybe where we can agree is that Nichushkin might be one of the last point per game players that you'll get in your draft. Does that
Yeah.
seem reasonable? I don't think he's going to slip very far, but you might be able to get him when that caliber of player is running out.
Yeah, and I feel like he just has the upside to be more, especially also like with the goals specifically. Like it's in a league like a cupful where we give more weight to goals. He just seems to always score goals. I really enjoyed having him on my team this past year, so maybe I'm a bit biased, but I think I might be someone who's even reaching for him, and it'll be fun to see. We'll have to see when projections come out and see where people have him. But I could see myself, going around earlier and getting this guy who I think maybe people like you say will be waiting for like the last of the point per game players. But yeah, we'll see how the rest of the playoffs go. On the Dallas side, So Miro Heiskanen doing his playoff thing, right? Like he had obviously that really famous run where he really broke out when Dallas made it to the Cup Finals in the bubble season. Heiskanen is now like 9 points in 10 games. He's been great. Yeah, I looked down the list of like the leading scorers on Dallas, and next up is Jason Robertson. So you would think like, okay, he's great. Like obviously 8 points in 10 games, and Dallas is like not been scoring like so many goals like that first series was against Vegas, who's like a good defensive team. So like whatever. But like when you look a little bit into the game log for Jason Robertson, he's got assists in 3 straight games, which is nice. But there's no shots against Colorado. He had 1-0-1-0-1. Those are his shot counts in his last 5 games. This is a guy who was being picked routinely in the first round of fantasy drafts last season, and maybe he's probably already played himself out of that from his regular season, right? Where he only had 80 points in 82 games. Here's my crazy question to you, Brian. You're drafting right now for next year. You've got Nichushkin and Jason Robertson both out there. Is it crazy to be considering Valerie Nichushkin here?
Huh. Okay. That's a fun one.
Pretty similar regular seasons in terms of point paces.
Yeah, I think. Wow. Okay. So here's my thinking on it. Like one of the big value pieces for Jason Robertson was that he was taking 4 shots a night, basically. Not this season, but the one before it. And this year, that number saw a huge hit. And I was looking into why, and I think I've settled on an answer, and that it's the power play. Jason Robertson was like the power play shooter, and he had 13 power play goals in 82 games, on his way to 41 power play points, taking 4 shots a night. This season, he took closer to 3 shots a night and had 9 power play goals. So actually, he didn't fall that far off. But the shots matter, right? Like a 4-shot guy is really hard to find. A 3-shot guy, there's a few more of those, including Valerie Nichushkin this year, and the last couple of years has been a 3-shot a night player. So Robertson on the power play, what seems to have happened in Dallas is they are sharing the wealth on that top unit, and actually on the second unit too. Like if you look at who's taking the most shots in the minutes they have on the Dallas power play, it's a pretty even distribution. And if you see where the shots are coming from too, they skewed last season in 22-23 to where Robertson was like camped out and set up. And this year, Dallas focused a little less heavily on that side, on the Robertson side, and is more coming down the middle. And their power play was like about as effective, a little more effective this year with this new sort of share the wealth setup than it was last year when they relied more heavily on Jason Robertson. So I don't know that Jason Robertson is going to be the power play trigger man again. And if he's not, yeah, I guess I could see things standing the way they are for Robertson, which is like, yeah, point per game pace, 3 shots a night. And I think, Elon, you're not wrong to sort of put him on the same plane as Valery Nichushkin at this point. I still have, the thing with Robertson is we've seen him reach the crazy heights that he has before, and it wasn't only because he was shooting more on the power play. He just had a really fantastic season a couple years ago. And I remember that this season he started off really slow and we weren't sure what was wrong. So I'm not going to, I think for upside purposes, I might still lean Robertson. But I think it's an interesting point to say that they could be close. Also, I will say another advantage for Robertson is that he's not in danger of getting moved to the second power play. And I know we feel like we might be past that with Nichushkin, but I still, I need to see it for, a long time. I need to see him hold that spot for the better part of a year. I think Nichushkin's place in the lineup might be a little more certain than Jarvis, but not a whole lot, and certainly not as certain as Robertson's.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you there. I will say that Dallas is a team where there's a lot of really exciting people coming in. Like we've seen Wyatt Johnston be like the star of the playoffs for a lot of it. He's taking more shots, by the way, than Robertson. Even Logan Stankoven has more shots right now than Robertson. And those are two guys that have been on the second power play. I don't know if Stankoven and Johnston are going to be PP2 guys for too much longer. Not saying that Robertson is one who gets bumped. Obviously, it could be like a Jamie Benn or a Joe Pavelski who gets bumped from the top power plays. I'm sure you're right. I will say though that as just like Dallas is going to have a lot of changes. So I get a little bit more nervous about, just like banking on previous data for Jason Robertson, just because it was a different team, like when he really exploded, it was like they had a top line that was like the clear best line and no one was really close. Like you had Robertson, Hintz, and Pavelski and everyone else was like blah. And now it's like a very deep team. While Colorado, if you have like McKinnon, Rantanen, and Nichushkin on a line, it's like they're going to do so much. But obviously, that'll be really fun to follow. The other player I'll just mention quickly on Dallas, and obviously nothing is changing here, but Jake Ottinger, just once again proving to be one of the top goalies in fantasy, 919 save percentage in the playoffs right now. So good for him. Not all of the top end goalies have been having similar playoffs. And, you look at like Connor Hellebuck, who had a terrible save percentage in his first round, and then you could be like, yeah, but it was against Colorado. Well, Ottinger's right now also against Colorado, though. To be fair, maybe Dallas is giving better protection than Hellebuck got.
You know what? I can actually check that. So
I think it's almost for sure the case, but yeah, give me the official confirmation there.
Yeah, actually, well, I'm looking. Ottinger has the best protection at 5-on. Oh no, this is actually at all strengths. I usually just like to look at 5-on-5, but at all strengths, Ottinger has had the best protection of anybody in the playoffs. But he's
Hellebuck?
Hellebuck. I'm gonna look towards the bottom. Yeah, he's towards the bottom. He's down there with 14th out of 18 goalies who played at least a few games. So yeah, but we saw that coming. But interestingly, like Hellebuck was one of the goalies who most underplayed his expected number, and Ottinger has been someone who has most overplayed his expected number. So, both goalies still have earned the fates that they find themselves with, regardless of the protection factor, at least in this small sample. But yeah, Ottinger's been great. And I was watching, I can't remember. I think I think it was the Game 7. It didn't feel like Game 7, but I think it was. And it didn't feel like it because Ottinger was doing this post-game interview where like things were like super intense against Vegas for the last 10 minutes, especially the last minute or two. And like he just came off the ice and like the reporter asked him like one question. He was just like chatting with them. Like he did not care. He could have sat there all night and just like all shucks guys, like talked his way through it. Like he could have recorded a podcast in that moment.
And they would call him like, Jake, we need you back on the ice. Like, oh, sorry, man, I gotta go. Let's check it later, okay? I'm just gonna go.
Yeah,
play a little bit.
That's what it felt. And like I feel like that actually is a quality that makes a good athlete and especially a good goalie, right? Like I'm sure like that is a skill of his. That's a strength. Just being able to remain cool under fire. He never looks flustered, and like I felt
Brian,
more intense in that moment than Ottinger was projecting.
I think you have this strength as a podcaster, like I think a lot of people coming on a podcast haven't tried to sound smart, would be like nervous. I'll bet you right now are like not feeling any nerves. And I'll bet you we could be in the middle of the podcast and someone could call you to the side and be like, Brian, how tell me about like why you came up with this answer on the podcast, why you came up, you would chat about it, then you'd come back. No, it doesn't phase you. So you have a little Jake Ottinger in you.
That's just like one of many things Jake Ottinger and I have in common.
Yeah. Let's go to the other Western series. So Edmonton and Vancouver are really fun. The remaining hopes for us Canadians. We know that we're going to get one team in the conference finals, so that's fun. Which one is it going to be? So yeah, I believe they're playing today, right? So by the way, update here: Panthers are now beating the Bruins 3-2, and yeah, Vancouver and Edmonton are about to start their game 3. I guess right as we're finishing the podcast, so we won't have any up-to-date info there. Do you want to start? Let's start on the Oilers. Their point leaders are so funny. So they've played 7 games going into today, right? You've got the guys on the top power play: McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman, Bouchard, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. You look at their point totals in 7 games: 17 for McDavid, 16 for Draisaitl, 11 for Hyman, 11 for Bouchard, 9 for RNH. Just like above point per game. David and Draisaitl, just insane numbers. The next highest leading scorer on the team, 3 points. Then we got a few 3s, some bunch of 2s, some 1s. It's just like, this is such a, like, it's just the top power play. And then everyone else is a nobody. And that includes like Yuri Vander Kane, like some players that maybe were somebodies at some point. But yeah, There's no real surprises,
This
unfortunately, for
is
me to bring up here on Edmonton.
Yeah, this is like the embodiment. Like Edmonton is the embodiment of the studs and duds strategy, and not to say like everyone's a dud, everyone else is a dud on Edmonton, but really you're gonna live and die. And like I think this was made all the more apparent when there was this like Leon Draisaitl like injury concern that may or may not still be there to some extent, but you know he missed some of the game, and then it was like, well, how is he? We need an update, and there wasn't really one. And it's like, oh my gosh, like this Oilers team that looks so unstoppable because of McDavid and Draisaitl, and I will add Hyman to that mix, like is so human, like so fragile once they lose McDavid or like either of those two. At least that's my perception, and it really bears out in the numbers. Like it's crazy how many points those top 4 or 5 players have, like McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman, Bouchard, and RNH, and then nobody else has made a significant contribution. It's certainly it's a really fun way to win a cup, but you are dancing on the razor's edge every time those guys step on the ice.
Well, yeah, and then also, of course, another thing that makes them seem very human is their goaltending, because Stuart Skinner is gonna have to be better if they're going to get by Vancouver and get to a cup. He's now sitting at an 888 save percentage, letting 3 goals in that last game. The Oilers got the win, but he let in 3 goals on only 19 shots. The Oilers are doing their best to suppress these shots, and Skinner's still not coming through for them. He let in 5 goals, of course, in the Game 1 loss. So we'll have to see. He did shut out LA in a game in the first round, and he had a couple good games in the playoffs, but I guess it's a different beast here in the second round. And I would be really nervous as an Oilers fan, just like we have the best players in the league. But then the funny thing is that Vancouver, like they're without Demko. They've been playing Artur Silovs. He's also, I guess, they're against Edmonton though. He looked good in his couple games in that last series. Now Silovs has led in like 4 goals in a couple straight games. It's kind of like with the Hellebuck thing. Like I don't want to put too much blame on him because it's against a team that scores a ton of goals. But yeah, Skinner, you would have hoped would be the clear better goalie in a series against the third stringer Artur Silovs, but hasn't really been the case so far.
Yes, Skinner has been struggling, and he had a good regular season. He wasn't the best goalie. He definitely wasn't the worst goalie. He played above his expected number, and had I don't know what it's worth this year. Well, he was somewhere between Ilya Sorokin and Capo Kakinen. Wow. But that's in the that doesn't sound that great when I put it that way.
Well, also Sorokin isn't like.
Well,
We'll get to
exactly.
him.
It
Yeah,
means
he
something
wasn't.
different. But you know what? Skinner seemed like really right. Like he's actually, like, I'm looking at him as kind of like the guy, like right in the middle of it, like right at the end of a tier of goalie who were like pretty good, but not consistently great. But still good enough to be a number 1 goalie in the league. But yeah, he hasn't looked that way in the playoffs. In fact, at 5-on-5, Stuart Skinner owns one of the worst save percentages so far, an 892 save percentage at 5-on-5, only better than Hellebuck's 885 and Cam Talbot's 885. Really, actually, every other goalie, well, Vasilevsky is at 897, and then the next goalie is Georgiev, who's still in the mix at 899, right? Like, so a lot of these teams were eliminated. So Skinner has lived on, but I don't know how much further you can make it on this goaltending. But the Oilers don't really have any other option. Like, I still think he's their best. A part of me would love like Jack Campbell to like get the call and like play really well, but no one wants to put their fate in the hands of Jack Campbell at this
No,
moment.
I would like to see Pickard. I feel like Pickard is one of these goalies that like he reminds me a little bit of an Alex Lyon. Like give him a shot. Maybe he could. He seems pretty good. I don't know. We'll see. Anyways, they're gonna roll. I
don't think
Skinner,
I just don't think he's as good as Skinner, or at least he hasn't shown it yet. I hear you. Like, I know he's exactly the profile of guy that you like. I at one time in my life wanted to see more of, but I actually think. And like Pickard played really well in the regular season too at 5-on-5. So I you know what? I can't disagree with you other than
we'll see.
Like, I like the Stuart Skinner story and I want him to keep doing well. And that's really, it's like my personal bias. I think he can get it right.
Yeah, well, let's talk about some of these players that are having their way with Stuart Skinner so far in the series over in Vancouver. I guess one of them who hasn't been too effective, though he did score a power play goal yesterday, Elias Pettersson, now only 4 points in 8 playoff games. Is this going to be one of these things where you're going to be like, maybe there's an injury? Like, are we? This is another one of my things. I'm going to try to find a player, that you're going to change your opinion on. Because, if you look at just the regular season for Elias Pettersson, it was like pretty good, like 89 points in 82 games. So, an 89-point pace. Obviously, he played every game. Very far from his 105-point pace the year before. Also the season, like he really slowed down at the end, right? Like Pettersson was like 100+ point pace for the first half of the year, kind of sputtered right at the end there. 14 points in 19 games probably hurt a lot of people who were depending on him for their fantasy playoffs. Now in the actual playoffs, for people who drafted him high in the KKPP round 1, they got burned. He didn't really produce for them. So now I think he's someone who's going to leave it. Well, I mean, there's still a lot to go, of course, which is the problem with doing a show in the middle of the playoffs like this. But if assuming the playoffs ended today, I think that would leave a pretty sour taste in people's mouth. Maybe people would be dropping Pettersson out of the first round. I think already I feel like I like JT Miller. I don't know if this is more like JT Miller's gone up or Pettersson's gone down, but if I was picking my Canuck for the Cupful next year, if I could have anyone I want, I would take JT Miller over Pettersson. Are you there as well? And I'm curious, like, where you are on Pettersson after this, a slow playoffs and slow end of the season.
We've had this talk before about.
But it was on a
Miller
patron
and
cast, so we need to do it.
Oh,
yeah,
was
we
it?
need to do it now for the public.
Oh,
but unless it was the patron cast part that we released, in which case rerun.
I feel like we've had it a couple times, to be honest.
Okay.
And I
I'd
think
skip it.
Well, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other is my
I like
feeling of
Miller.
it. I know you like Miller because, well, I mean, if you're looking at the guy who's done it more often, it's JT Miller. Like, I'm just gonna read their last 3-point paces for JT Miller. It's 104, 84, 101, and Pettersson's like the inverse, 89, 105, 70. So yeah, I could see why you would go Miller, and I could see why you'd drop Pettersson into the top round. I do wonder, like, the injury situation, just because there's a few things for sure stand out about Pettersson at the end of the regular season. He had just 5 points in his last 11 games. He also only took 6 shots over his last 5 games, which, for a guy who takes, well, he averaged 2.5 shots per game this season. Last year, he averaged over 3 shots per game. So it's a little curious. His minutes were down towards the end of the season. I think he was resting, in preparation. Like, he was still playing, but he was resting. Pettersson also only scored once in his last 13 games. So Pettersson's playoff struggles aren't brand new. They're kind of a continuation of the end of his regular season, and the shots still aren't coming. He has only 12 shots through 8 games, which is 1.5 shots per night, which is like half as many as we could reasonably expect. His minutes are also still down relative to what we'd expect Pettersson to see in the regular season. So I'm not going to say because of this I'm changing my projection substantially. I think that Pettersson is hurt. I think something's up. But at the same time, I will also say that I can, the one argument I'll give for Pettersson over JT Miller is that Pettersson, is 25 years old and Miller's 31 years old. So there might be room for Pettersson to find still a new level and hold there, while Miller, he doesn't look like he's slowing down. And this year, by the way, Miller shot almost 20%, which is a career high. And I'm not sure that'll last. So I could see them really kind of finding one another in pace, aligning at the end of the day. And I think you could pick your flavor. Miller seems a little more reliable, but Pettersson's upside, I still think, is bigger than Miller's.
Okay, yeah. No, that's all very fair for sure. Another great performer for the Canucks in these playoffs has been Brock Besser with his 8 points in 8 games, continuing off his great 73-point regular season. So for anyone who might be thinking that regular season was a fluke, I think this playoffs isn't changing my opinion of Besser, but it's more like cementing my opinion that this is probably the real Brock Besser. The guy who I am curious to get your take on is Dakota Joshua. Is this someone that we have to start considering as he's going to be someone worth drafting in fantasy next year? Is he maybe someone that's he's at 7 points in 8 games right now? I didn't take him in either of my KKPP round drafts. I'm wondering now if maybe he's someone I need to start paying more. If I could somehow sneak through to round 3, he's going to get taken. I wonder if it's by me. He had a big 1 goal, 2 assist game against Edmonton. I guess he's had 2 3-point games and then like only another game with 1 assist. So I guess it's pretty make or break. Now that I look at the game log, it makes me kind of think that maybe this is just like he had a couple big games, but otherwise. But I've thought that before. And he also, I remember in the regular season, had a few big games, but I was pretty surprised.
Yeah, that's kind of been the story with Dakota Joshua. Is like he's been a decent. He turned into a decent stream because it seemed like he could go off or go on a run at any given moment, but he did have like some sustained periods of production. And over the last basically the second half of his season, the last 35 games, I think he missed a bunch due to injury. In like February and March, but he had 24 points over his last 35 games. Mind you, he took fewer than 2, like he took a shot and a half per game, basically, and he was scoring on a quarter of his shots. So it wasn't like a sustainable way that Joshua was keeping some version of fantasy relevance. And he also like would move like up and down the lineup a lot. So I think if anything, Dakota Joshua here is cementing himself as like a post-draft watch list or a late round flyer or like a former Vetrano-like streamer. And I think that's as high as I can see his value going, even with a good playoff performance, until we see anything beyond this.
Yeah, that's fair. By the way, another UFA on this team is, of course, Elias Lindholm. So he's having a decent enough playoffs. We'll see how he's definitely playing for money. Similar to what I said about Brady Shea, I think Lindholm's like next contract is going to depend quite a bit on how he does for the rest of this playoff stretch because of the disappointing stretch he had in Vancouver after getting traded. Okay, so I guess we've talked about 3 of the series. We just have to finish off with Florida and Boston. Did this game end yet? Oh, there's 5 seconds left according to ESPN. Let's check Twitter. Let's see Baba in Boston. What is that? Why am I reading this tweet? Swayman going to pitch another. Okay. Swayman off for the extra attacker. So what's going on here? Panthers win 3-2. Okay. It's our Colby guy confirms it. I guess anyone watching the game could have also confirmed it. But yeah, 3-1 series lead for the Cats
confirmed?
right now. Florida beat Boston today. The game just ended.
I'm glad someone could confirm that for me. I only had the score available to me. It's good to have eyes on the ground.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't confirmed yet on ESPN, but I see now it is. So yes, I could double confirm that Florida won the game 3-2.
Never been more certain that a team won a game as I am right now.
Yeah, so I guess we already talked a little about Brandon Montour, 2 straight multi-point games. Didn't get a point today, so another guy obviously playing for his next contract. Another interesting guy has been Gustav Forsling. Looks like no points today. He had 6 points in 8 games going into today. He's someone who Florida's already extended, like a Noah Hannafin, right? He's like locked in now for, I think it's like 6 years, like 4 or 5 million a year. It's like a big contract for Forsling. And if Montour's gone, then Forsling could have a bigger role on the team next year. So I think he's not I would still take Hannafin ahead of him, but I think Forsling is going to be another guy that shows up on some sleeper D lists, and I think he'll be decent. I think he'll be someone good. And on the flip side, Aaron Ekblad, only 3 assists so far. Oh, look, he picked up an assist today. Okay, up to 4 assists now in 9 games. Ekblad, just what a fall off. I wonder now, because I mean, you could make, let's say Montour, and this is again a lot of conjecture, but imagine Montour signs somewhere else, so we go and they don't get any other defensemen that are worth talking about. You go into next year being this is Ekblad's chance. He's going to get the top power play back, and he'll go back to how he used to be, or is it just the shine is off and he's I don't know, not good anymore? What happened to this guy?
Sorry, I saw something that really took my attention away. Could you just who's
Ekblad sucks.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I was saying how what if Montour leaves, then Ekblad could be interesting next year because he would get top power play, but at the same time it's so yeah, I'm just curious to get your opinion on how you would feel about Ekblad if Montour got signed somewhere else.
Okay. I thank you for not sassing me too much on asking for the
I want to know, share with the class what the interesting thing was. Okay, maybe later. Okay.
What? Maybe later what?
No, I just said I want share with the class. What was this interesting thing? I'd love to know.
It was it's
not hockey related? Okay. All right.
No. Okay. Ekblad is only relevant when he's seeing top power play time. I think I feel really comfortable saying that. Like even the season before this one, Ekblad had 19 power play points and still only got to a 44-point pace. And really, the most productive years of Ekblad's career have been the outliers. Like, has he seen some poor variance at 5-on-5 the last couple of years? Sure. Like, yeah, he's been a little less involved, and his teammates are scoring on a little less of their shots. So I get it. But Ekblad will rely on will rely on Montour leaving to be relevant. I don't think I think maybe he's worth drafting as like a late round shot, just in case he does get that top power play role. But at this point, I'm not seeing like a whole lot of excitement from him offensively. 29-point pace this season, only 18 points in 51 games, and he was one of those guys this season where it was like Montour, right? They came back from injury. It's like, when is he going to get started? And Montour kind of did eventually. Ekblad never did, but Ekblad also never got the deployment that he had for the last 3 years, which was like a solid power play role for a substantial amount of time. So put that all together, and Ekblad is not someone like he's played himself out of fantasy relevance for me. And the one reason, like I said, I'll take him is because maybe there's a chance. It's the same reason I would have taken like Forsling at the start of this season, right? It's like, oh, he's got an opportunity. Or who was it Ekman Larson?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, maybe he'll get up there. Maybe he'll take advantage of a chance. That's the reason to take Ekblad right now. But even with top power play, he's still not necessarily like a sure shot rosterable guy.
Yeah, and there won't be. Yeah, I think that'll be an interesting conversation this summer. Or maybe Florida just re-signs Montour. Maybe they go on, win the cup this year. They have to hold on to their core, and at this point, Montour's clearly a big part of this team. But yeah, other than the defense, like nothing's really too surprising on Florida. Alex Barkov is having himself a series so far. Just scored the winning goal today after having 2 assists in the previous game and 2 goals and 2 assists in the second game of the series. Shams is asking thoughts on Anton Lundell. So yeah, I see he got himself on the score sheet again today. Oh yeah, sorry, it was Lundell who scored he scored the first goal of the game. Oh, and he had an assist on a Sam Bennett power play goal from the second power play. So yeah, I guess Anton Lundell, like he's a guy who I remember when he was coming up, like Victor, the prospect expert that I often go to, was always talking about how awesome Lundell is going to be. But then it just seemed like he settled into like third line center on this team. And you look at today's lines. I know there was a stretch where Lundell was playing on a line with Reinhardt and someone. I guess maybe Tarasenko was on the third line. Today was back to Rodriguez, Luosterainen, and Lundell. So I think at the end of the day, like I think he's like a really good player. But it just seems like if he's going to always be third line, second power play, he'll be like great for a stream. I'll grab him in a KKPP draft near the end if I make it to round 3, because I know he's like going to get decent minutes and be good, but it's hard to like really depend on him. This isn't even like what we were talking about before with like a Wyatt Johnston or, like a second, not top power play. This is like third line and second power play.
Yeah, and like completely undependable too for Tarasenko. So I agree. Elon.
No, Lundell. Sorry, I'm talking about Lundell.
Oh. Dang. Got to say the name more often. Okay. Yeah, there's just not like I remember Lundell being a preseason like interesting guy because he could be centering the second line at some point, and he had this offensive upside to be more. He's had a nice little run of production here in the playoffs, but I agree, Elon, the opportunity is just not there. And Zeus in the chat is, I think, making an Anthony Cirelli comparison. I think that's pretty good. Like both have similar reputations, right? As being like solid two-way players who sometimes can get offensive, but generally that's not what they're asked to do. And I think that's a really great comp right there.
Yeah, and we'll see. Like Lundell is still young, and Florida does have some guys that might not come back next year. So Lundell's only 22 years old. Like we're really young. Right, this is a 12th overall pick, Jarvis territory, and Jarvis took a few years. It's been like Lundell's been in the league already. It feels like a long time. I feel like we've been talking about him for many seasons. This was already only his 3rd season. Okay. Well, yeah, but as I was going to say, like Reinhardt is a UFA, Tarasenko, of course. So like there's some top 6 spots here that might open up. But or like maybe Florida will just be excited to use him as a third line center. Like I'll give another comp to you, but it's again like another super young guy. But over on New Jersey, you look at like a Dawson Mercer who's like super talented and great, but then they also like seem to like him on the third line. Didn't work out that well for the team this past year. I feel like like I see like Lundell as like similar to maybe Mercer. Where, like I feel like with the right deployment, these guys could like really go off, but just their teams. It's not even like they don't trust them. It's like almost like the opposite. Like they're so good that the team like just likes to use them where they're using them. They're effective all over the lineup. So why not like shore up your bottom six or your middle six?
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And like these guys can be hard. Like when you find a good one and you don't need the offense, then you can really make full use of them. I wonder if like Phil No is not like another great example, but also in this sphere where, I think could thrive if he was asked to do more offensively. But well, the Kings are maybe a different situation at this point. But for like a Sorelli and Lundell type, it's like, why bother, right? We have other guys who do that.
Yeah, okay. Brian, let's take a quick break and then we'll finish off talking about the Bruins and then a few of the other teams that made the playoffs and left far too soon. We'll be back in just a sec. All right, welcome back to Keeping Karlsson. So, yeah, the last team that's still around, barely hang on by a thread at this point now, is the Boston Bruins, who just lost, as we've discussed, to the Panthers. I guess one interesting note is Jeremy Swayman has been playing all the games, had a tough loss today, 42 shots against, led in 3 goals. So still a .929 save percentage, not enough to pull off the win. Bruins couldn't give him enough goal support. It's interesting. I was thinking about it. If you recall, Brian, the other goalie on the team, Linus Ullmark, won the Vezina last year. I think this might be the only time ever that the Vezina winner was the backup for his team in the playoffs the following season. Like I guess there's been times where the Vezina winner didn't make the playoffs the next season, but like it's a pretty, and it's not really like the backup. Like we know they're like all season they were 50-50, but I guess they've just really been rolling with Swayman and he's been good. We'll see. I'm sure Swayman gets the next game. We'll see. I guess the other big news in Boston. So Marchand is hurt. Sam Bennett smashed him in the head. That replay looked like, it depends on the angle. It looks like a clean hit or it looks like he just like smashed him with his stick. But yeah, Marchand had a great playoffs, right? He destroyed the Leafs, especially at the start of that series, and like 10 points in 10 games overall for Marchand before now getting injured. I wonder if this is a sign, Brian. Is that something that sways you for next year? Like I assume he'll be back healthy for next season. He only had 67 points this past year, but like point per game in the playoffs. Where are you landing right now in terms of Marchand and what you're expecting for next year? Is he still like, because I guess the way you could look at his regular season is like, okay, he's declining. He's like whatever, 34, 35 years old. Maybe it was just like some bad luck, and we saw in the playoffs he still has it.
I think Marchand definitely still has it, and it might be just like he thrives in the playoffs. And I know like there's a lot of talk about you need guys who know how to step their game up in the playoffs, but like I truly believe like Brad Marchand has the track record of being one of those guys. I will say that I'm not like fully convinced by this that Marchand is just gonna like return to being as great as he always has been. Like I know he was coming back from injury this year, but I see his point paces having declined for 4 consecutive years now. He's 36 years old. Oh, he just turned 36 yesterday. Happy belated birthday, Brad Marchand. His ice time is like, it's not like falling in a big way, but I can't, you can't lock it in with Brad Marchand, and I'm not feeling necessarily any more locked in on him because of the playoff performance. I think he is just like, this is his brand of hockey. This is what works for him. So it's at least it makes me think that he can hold on to the 70-75 point paces that he's put up the last couple seasons, but it doesn't reassure me that he can get all the way back up to 90. Like I think the like Boston, and also the counterpoint to myself on that is that maybe Boston took a while to figure out how to get over Patrice Bergeron, and maybe they did later on in the season, and maybe they're still like, maybe they've got that now, especially we've seen Charlie Coyle play a bigger role every so often. So that would be the reason that I'd think maybe Marchand could get back up to over a point per game pace, but it's not something that I'm going to bank on.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. David Pastrnak having kind of a disappointing playoffs, relative to his regular season. Scored a power play goal today, obviously not enough to get Boston the win. So that brings him to 8 points in 11 games. I think obviously a lot of people would have expected him to be like well above a point per game based on what he did in the regular season. Also, the power plays on Boston have been weird. Like they've been splitting up, like they're not that deep, with top end talent to like split up Marchand and Pastrnak, but they had been going with Pasta on PP2. And I guess now, obviously, with Marchand injured, it's a whole different story. But I'm not going to read too much into that for next season. I'd expect them to go back to having Marchand and Pasternak on the top power play, but just a interesting observation. I think I would caution people to not read into.
Agree. That's it. I agree.
Yeah. All right. So those are all the teams that are still in. Brian, I have a few notes still about some of the teams that we haven't talked about yet that lost in the first round. Though I did realize I skipped over a question I wanted to ask you. We talked about Lafreniere and how amazing he's been at the start of the show. And I mentioned in passing Wyatt Johnston and the series and playoffs he's been having for Dallas. I think these two are very similar, like super young players, not on their team's top power play, but on a big line on the team. Who would you who are you leaning towards in terms of if you're drafting for next season between Johnston and Lafreniere? Who do you have an inkling as to who you think is the guy you would lean towards?
Yeah, I think I'd go Lafreniere.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of if I need to offer, like they're both second line. They're both second power play.
Johnston's 65 points this season, by the way. He's not
Yeah.
only a great playoffs, and he's only
Yeah.
20. I think I'd
I,
lean Johnston.
32 goals in a sophomore season is pretty amazing. I It's a good one, and they're very similar players. Huh. I
Food for thought. You don't have to answer right
I
now.
think it's food for thought. Like I'd love to have a better take than I don't know.
Why don't you think about it and get back to us for next episode? For
I'm
that one.
not. You
It's,
know,
it's late.
I think they might just be a really great comparison in
Okay,
value.
well,
Like if they come
maybe,
up at the same time, I'll like look to the schedule tiebreak. But if
Oh,
if I find anything, let's revisit. Let's
okay.
revisit. I'll see if I come up with anything else. And if anyone listening has a thought to share, um,
Come to
become a
KK
patron
yeah.
and share it on our Discord because like we I don't know, I guess we still see mentions on our Twitter, but it's
Yeah,
not the
I
best
still
way
respond
to get in
I still
touch.
respond to people on Twitter.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd love come to KK episode discussion. Let us know your answer. I have a hunch that Wyatt Johnston is gonna continue to
think
grow next season.
Yeah, I think the goals are really exciting, and they didn't seem to come in an unsustainable way. I think that's like, how do you overlook a guy who's 20 years old and scored more than 30 goals in his second year in the league
Yeah, without top power play.
without top power play?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then maybe let me throw a third guy in the mix. We could go to the first team that was eliminated in round one here, LA. They lost. Bummer in 5 games to Edmonton. Looked like they could be a good team this year, but went out just with a sputter. One guy that was good though, obviously Kempe was good. Not too surprising. Quinton Byfield, 4 assists in 4 games. I guess for a league like Cupful, where goals are worth more, that makes Byfield a little less interesting. But where does Byfield fit in with these two guys, Johnson, Lafreniere? Is it like a tier below, or is Byfield right up there with them?
I think he's right up there with them. And I'll say that because even if he hasn't necessarily shown like quite the same scoring chops as either Johnston or Lafreniere has, he's got the deployment to make up for it, right? Top line, top power play for most of the season, also for most of the playoffs. And I feel like, and I was watching LA a bit more towards the end of the season and some of the playoffs, like he seems like he's rounding into form. Like he's a big guy, right? 6'5", 225. He's 21 years old. I feel like he's still like growing into that body and figuring out how to be most effective with it. And I think once he figures that out, he's going to be like really freaking hard to stop. And I think that moment might be coming soon. So I'll put Byfield up there with Johnston and Lafreniere. Are you? Or are you gonna be a little like he hasn't done yet what they've done, but I also think he's in the best position to keep doing.
Yeah, no, I definitely get what you're saying, especially with the deployment. I'm gonna have Johnston number one, and then maybe the other two like pretty similar. I say, but all like it's really gonna be fun next year. Going to these drafts every year, you've got like I feel like we're in the new class now. You know, you can still obviously pick Crosby and feel pretty good, but there's a lot of like new exciting players that are I think gonna be really like rising in ADP from last year to this year. Maybe that happens every year and I just like forget about it, but it feels like there's just a lot of really exciting guys. A couple people, of course, that are gonna fall on LA. Well, one is Pierre-Luc Dubois, who's probably not even going to get drafted, even though he's one of their highest paid players. He only had 1 assist in the 5 playoff games. That's year one of this huge contract. That is looking like a huge mistake, especially because didn't they trade Brock Faber to get Fiala? So not only do they, or no, that's Fiala.
Dubois?
Oh yeah, I'm thinking of Dubois. Who did they? They traded to Winnipeg. It was what's that guy's name? That really good guy that was on the top line of Winnipeg for a lot of the
Velarde.
season. Velarde, yeah. Always sucks if you gave up good players and also you have an albatross contract. So we'll see if Dubois can bounce back. But yeah, that playoffs wasn't good. Fiala, I do have written down here, only 2 points in 5 games. I'm not going to worry about that. Also, LA is going to be interesting to watch in the offseason with the goaltending, right? Talbot and Riddick both stunk. I don't think either of them are signed beyond the season. So LA could just go with all new goalies next year. Maybe Phoenix Copley is the starter going into next year like he thought it would be this year. But I say that in jest.
Yeah, sorry, I was looking at the Kings goaltending, like we know was a problem all year, and they got away with it for about a quarter of the season, and then, or maybe even half, and then they couldn't anymore. I'm just looking at like Dubois' like trade history. You know, like the Kings traded not just Velarde, but Alex Iafallo, and I just feel and Rasmus Kupari and a second round pick in this year's entry draft for Dubois. And I even just feel like I bet the Kings would have rather had Alex Iafallo. Like, even if they traded, like, Velarde, like, even if they didn't get Velarde and Kupari back, if they could have just, like, done a trade back, Dubois for Iafallo, I feel like he would have been more helpful to them in this playoff situation.
Yeah, pretty
Tough-
sad. Who knows?
tough going.
I mean, Dubois still young. They need center. Like, you know, maybe this will work out. Maybe this could be like a Pavelski. He had a really bad first year in Dallas, but trying to just give some bright spot to Kings fans. I guess let's do the Leafs talk. We talked about them a bunch on our last Patreon cast. Obviously, there's been so many articles about what went wrong with the team. How like I really liked an article by Damus Chishin about how they were like playing, you know, like a defensive game in the playoffs. And it's like, you know, that's like a lot of coaches feel like that's the way you win in the playoffs. But it's like, it's not their game. You know, like they were like one of the highest scoring teams in the league in the regular season and just like totally changed the way they played. And it obviously didn't work out for them, even though they had a couple really good games at the end of the series. So anyways, a lot of good articles out there, a lot of good conversations that we had. Obviously, they fired their coach. They're going to finally go in a different direction. I guess we'll find out what happens with the core. I know a lot of people are talking about Mitch Marner potentially getting traded in the offseason. He only had 3 points in the 7 games. John Tavares only 2 points in his 7 games. Both have, I guess, 1 year left in their contracts. So, you know, the interesting thing is actually, if you look at the leading scorers on the Leafs in the series, it was Matthews and then tied with Bertuzzi and Domi, all with 4 points. And Bertuzzi and Domi, I believe, are both free agents. So the Leafs have some big decisions to make. One, I think, easy decision they'll make is to not re-sign Ilya Samsonov, who stunk, and Joseph Woll, I guess, will be their number 1, or we'll see if they can find another goalie to maybe make a tandem. I don't know. I just feel like everything's been said about the Leafs. I can't even think of a question to ask you that's worthy of a long discussion.
Yeah, I have no hot Leafs take, except that I think Joseph Woll is good enough. I think I saw, I don't know, I think it was Brad Treliving. Like, someone just said, like, he gets injured a little too much.
Well, yeah, you don't want to depend on him.
Right.
Because,
So it's like
yeah,
you do need a backup plan, and I don't think like Samsonov, like on a cheap enough contract, might be an okay backup plan, but not anyone you ever want. Like, how many backups are there that you're okay ending up having to rely on? Like, there aren't a ton. So I'm not sure how crazy the Leafs should go here.
I've got a name for you,
Okay.
but you're gonna laugh at me. Does that make you
Okay.
guess who it's gonna be? There's a goalie that I like.
Is it Cam Talbot?
No. There's another goalie that I like.
Kevin Lankinen.
Lankinen. He's
Yeah.
good. Get
You know
Lankinen.
what? Sure. Why not? You know, Chris Driedger is out there too. Like there's a bunch of like Calvin Pickard. I don't know. Like there's some guys who like basically if you're looking for a free agent goalie, it's like there's some guys who we haven't completely written off, right? Like in
Right.
the
When you have no cap space.
yeah, I mean like even like Laurent Brossoit.
Yeah, he's
could
good.
yeah, like he's done really well as a backup. He hasn't been able to earn a job as a starter, but he hasn't really been in a place where he could do that either.
Hmm.
Um, I worry. So like Dom made the argument that the Leafs are. I'm not gonna go back into my whole like 2020s Leafs are the early aughts Sens. But there's like it's like I'm watching the same show. Like this is a rerun. And so Dom's article is about how the Leafs like are trying to like change from like this regular season juggernaut and like sacrifice some of that to be built for the playoffs. And I think Dom's argument was kind of like, why not just play the way you play in the regular season, like where you dominate
Yeah.
and run the table and offense wins you games? And why do you all of a sudden want to change everything to conform to what other teams want to play in playoff hockey, and isn't to your strength? So I thought it was a great article, and I encourage everyone to go read it by our friend Dom.
Would he
I
call us his friend?
Yeah, he'd call us babe. Is what he'd call us.
I remember like the thing I found
I
interesting was he was sharing like some like cards or whatever of like Matthews and Marner were like the best defensive, like they played their best defensive hockey they ever have or something. Like they were like two like really dominant defensive players in that series. But it's just like,
Yeah,
who
but it
cares?
still
Like no one
wasn't.
wants
Yeah,
you to do that.
exactly. Like you're freaking like go get some defensive players to play defensively. Like don't
Yeah.
waste. So so I agree with Dom's, and I'm saying like I saw the Sens do the same. Like they tried everything to be more like the teams that beat them, but it only moved them further from their goal ultimately, which they never ended up reaching. And I feel like that's what the Leafs are doing. They're going to try and emulate the way the Sens tried to emulate the Leafs. The Leafs are trying to emulate the Bruins, and I'm not sure it's going to work out any better. And I'm concerned that will like management will learn the wrong lessons, because I think a day or two after Dom's article came out, I think I saw something from Brad Treliving saying like, we need to figure out a way to win those close games, to not be one goal back but one goal up. And like of course, but the way he said it made it sound like he still just wanted to try and conform, like tailor the team to conform to the playoff expectation rather than to exceed it with their anyway. So that's I don't have a hot Leafs
That's
take.
our Leafs talk.
That's my Leafs talk.
Yeah. Be like the Oilers. Win 5-4 or lose 5-4, but it makes it more fun also. I watched a lot of these Leafs games. I'm in Toronto. I was going to this bar. I was going to Shocks. All my friends are from around here were like, let's go to Shocks. I was like, nowhere else? I'm like, now we're going to Shocks. I'm like, all right, we're going to Shocks. And just watched a lot of low-scoring hockey. So, okay. Let's talk about the Islanders. So Sorokin, holy cow. He played one game of the series. He started game 3 and got pulled after letting in 3 goals on 14 shots. This is just a brutal end to not a great season. Varlamov, meanwhile, was really good for a losing goalie in a 5-game series. He had a .914 save percentage against Carolina. I just the question, which I don't think we can answer right now, is like, how many tiers has Sorokin fallen in Schmore goalie's board? Now, like this past season, we must have had him like tier 2, like right among your top goalies you can draft in fantasy. He seemed like the sure number 1 at this point. Amazing goalie, like decent enough team. Now it's like, is he even a starter? So it's like, how high are you going to draft a guy? But at the same time, obviously the upside's there. But I feel like he's going to be in like our tier 6 or tier 5. Like, I'm curious to know what you think.
Yeah, he's going back to where he was a couple years ago when he was last in a tandem with Semyon Varlamov. I think that's it. I think I'm hoping whatever went wrong for him personally this season, he can get right. Or I say personally, but I mean professionally. Like in his own game, like he was not the dominant force that we've seen him be. I think definitely a challenge for him is that Patrick Waugh and Semyon Varlamov have like this existing relationship back from Colorado, and it seems like they want to continue it. And the way Varlamov played versus the way Sorokin played makes sense. So, unless Sorokin and Varlamov by their play, their respective play, force Waugh's hand to play Sorokin, I'm going to guess that they're just alternating until further notice. And so we had was it 1 year of Sorokin being like the starter, the workhorse, and putting up fantastic numbers? And at this point, we thought we might have had 3, but we've had a tandem year, an amazing year, and then a bad year. And so we'll see what next year brings. But you're right. He is out of the running to be like a top 3 or 4 tier goalie.
Yeah,
I
like
think that
maybe he'll
maybe I'd
be
put him
great,
like tier 4. I
like
need to
ahead of
see who
Varlamov
else.
or below Varlamov.
I'd put him ahead. Like I think you play enough games. I think Varlamov's another year older. He's also injury prone. I think Sorokin's gonna have his
Yeah.
chance to shine. Like I don't think he's lost it. I think that's the underlying question here. Like, can Sorokin be good again? I think the answer is yes. It's just a matter of when that opportunity to run away with the job is it will next be available.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the guy. You'd think after a long career of being so successful, like he won't let it get to his head that he had one bad year. But yeah, it'll be goalies are so hard to predict, and yeah, I mean, maybe at some point in fantasy drafts he'll feel like a value pick. Of course, you might be like, wow, you got Sorokin and like in the 12th round, like that's incredible. But like then we'll have to actually see it play out. Like I'm not going to be like over like drooling over people's like great value pick for Sorokin. I'll be like, that's an interesting option, and that could work out like so well for you. And someone's gonna get him a good value, seemingly, and then we'll just see how the season plays out. I think you're right that there's definitely a really good chance it could turn out to be a big home run if you get him super late. The other guy on the Islanders who let people down in these playoffs, Noah Dobson, only 1 assist in the 5 games. He also had a big cold stretch at the end of the regular season. Like he actually had a really good like final 4 games, but before that, only 1 assist in 9 games. Did we ever get any info on Noah Dobson if he was hurt? Or I didn't see anything on Game Day News about. I guess he was hurt for stretches near the end of the season, so maybe it was just more of that. I think he may be another person. Like I should have thrown him in with the defense conversation of like Roman Josi and whatever Adam Fox. Like maybe he'll be someone whose value falls a little bit. Maybe he actually will be someone whose value falls a little bit after a quiet playoffs. Maybe you can get him for value, unless you see a reason to actually be nervous about Noah Dobson.
No, I don't. Like through the year, I was always like I wasn't expecting to see it be sustainable, but it was for Noah Dobson for the most part. Like I remember he was on a crazy run to start the year, and I don't like we didn't see that lasting, and it didn't. But I mean, he saw a ton more ice this year than he had in the past. Almost 4 more minutes per night compared to last season. 2 more minutes a night compared to the season before, and he made the most of it. And it wasn't just him; his teammates did. But it wasn't like still. I'm looking back at the numbers now. None of them look particularly like luck oriented or unsustainable. So I think honestly, Elon, even if Dobson had a good short series, I still think he'd be flying under the radar for next year. 73-point pace this season, and I think he can do it again next
Cool.
season. Yeah.
Yeah. Hard to argue. Let's go to Tampa Bay. They actually had a very similar kind of makeup of their scoring standings as Edmonton, right? They had their top power play, which by the way, Brandon Hagel was back on the top power play, at least in that last game against Florida. So Stamkos, Kucherov, Point, Hagel, Hedman, all of these guys had between 5 and 7 points in the 5 games. Everyone else like less than 2. Like I know we were excited about our Anthony Duclair, like at the end of the year, some people were talking about him, like bust for the playoffs. We'll see what happens next year. But yeah, it was kind of like the studs were doing their thing, and everyone else was pretty irrelevant, except for Andrei Vasilevsky. Yikes, an 897 save percentage in those 5 games after probably his worst. I think his worst ever regular season as well. Only 900 save percentage. Do you think this is like Vasilevsky is declining? Or is it just like, again, like Sorokin, maybe just a blip, and next year he goes back to being awesome? I guess the big difference, maybe not actually, but like Tampa Bay is like not as good, So like Vasilevsky was also like playing for a really good team, which might not be the case as the years go by. But like I think Vasilevsky will also definitely fall in our Schmore goalies board. He has to, but also I feel like he could be really great value. And of course, the big difference between him and Sorokin is there's no competition.
Right. That's what Vasilevsky has going for him. And I think Tampa thinks that they can still contend, that their window's still open, and that Vasilevsky, like, it's going to have to happen because of him. Because when you're losing offensive firepower, like their team has thinned out consistently over the last couple seasons. So as that continues to happen, like we don't know where Stamkos is going to end up, then Vasilevsky's going to have to be like that special like value add. And for the Lightning, not necessarily your fantasy team. Last season was Vasilevsky's worst of his career in terms of playing compared to his expected number. He was expected to put up a save percentage of .937 at 5-on-5. he only put up a 933 save percentage, which doesn't sound like it. Like 4 save points is a fairly significant drop. Usually he outplays his expected number to a greater extent than 4 save points. Like the year before was 9. The 2 years before that, it was 7 save points. So, and also at 5-on-5, Vasilevsky's like straight up 5-on-5 save percentage was 905. I was mentioning Fenwick's save percentages before. That's why it's different. But 905 is terrible. It's almost 20 save points less than where he was the season before. So this was a season to forget for Vasilevsky. I would like to chalk it up to injury. It's maybe a good thing that Tampa went out early. So now Vasilevsky has like the full length of the summer to recover and come back next year being as good as he used to be. For what it's worth, Tampa didn't offer him any less protection than they had the couple years prior. So long as they can, hold the fort there, I'd like to think and hope that Vasilevsky can come back. But we know injuries are particularly troublesome for goalies.
Yeah, so I mean, Vasilevsky has definitely shown that he can be one of the best, and yeah, but like you say, the injury is the big concern. We'll find out how he looks next year. He'll definitely be a guy that I'll be. I mean, if I can, wait a few rounds, like I always like to, and get Vasilevsky at a decent pick in my fantasy drafts, I'll feel pretty good about it. Just because at least you're getting the volume, so you're getting that. A couple more teams here that we haven't talked about. Over in Winnipeg, we mentioned Hellebuck already. Also, like these, like Tampa Bay, like the studs did good, like Scheifele, Connor were good. Josh Morrissey was great in the 5 games before they went out to Colorado. A couple guys that really disappointed were their acquisitions mid-season, right? Tyler Toffoli, only 2 points. Sean Monahan, only 1 point in the 5 games. So I guess those mid-season trades didn't work out for the Jets. There's a short term, like Toffoli and Monahan will be UFAs now. We'll see. I don't know. It'll be hard. We'll talk about them when they sign on July 1st or whatever, and we'll try to project them. But they'll be interesting guys to talk about. But I guess there's no point talking about them now. I don't think they're coming back to the Jets after how this playoffs ended.
I mean, I think it probably depends on where the money is, right? And like how well they, whatever. Like at their point, I don't know that they necessarily have their pick, and we'll see if Winnipeg can hold on to them. But yeah, the Winnipeg was just like completely outmatched in their series, and there's not a whole lot more to say. Like they actually, it's what, Elon, I actually hadn't realized this until just now, but I look at expected goals share at 5-on-5 to try and get a sense of which teams are the best, and the worst at a nearly 40% expected goals share is Vegas. They were lucky to get to 7 against Dallas, and next up was Winnipeg. Like those two teams were outmatched in a special way. And then the Islanders, and then the Rangers. And then Predators, Leafs. Yeah.
Wait, so the Washington outplayed the Rangers? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. But, I also wonder if some of that was a function of the Rangers being like constantly in the lead. And so maybe they turtled a little bit and weren't, forcing as many scoring chances.
Interesting.
There could be some score effects at play there, but there weren't with Vegas and Winnipeg. We can confident, and like these are bad. Like 40% share is a bad share. Mm-hmm. It's a bad share.
Let's end with Washington. So I guess they lost in 4 to the Rangers. I thought they just got destroyed. I guess now you're saying maybe there's some extra context there to consider, but the big story, I guess, has got to be Ovechkin being pointless in those 4 games. The Rangers just knew exactly how to shut down Ovechkin, and that won them the series. Clearly, that was like obviously Ovechkin's the one player that can make a big difference on Washington. So now we end the season. Like Ovechkin had obviously a down year overall, but like not as terrible as maybe people might think. Like he still ended with 31 goals and 65 points. When you're projecting Ovi for next year, you thinking more of the same, or are you going to expect more of a dip? Like maybe now down to 25 goals and 55 points. Like I'm curious, and with Ovi, like a special kind of guy that you can't use your general insights that you use to project someone like him. But clearly, this was a step back, and these playoffs just give more reason to be concerned that he is finally running out of a little bit of steam.
Yeah, it's like after the season Ovechkin had. It would have been nice to see him show something at some point, and he really didn't, and I don't think it was just bad luck. And like my question with Ovi is like, who's gonna feed him? Who's gonna feed him? I don't know. Like, there's a reason he took only 5 shots, like for the whole series, and 4 of them came in a single game. The other 3 games, he had 0, 1, and 0 shots on goal.
In the last game, I'm seeing that Ovi played with Sonny Milano and Hendrix Lapierre.
Yeah.
I don't even know what was going on.
Well, exactly. I think that just shows the level of desperation that Washington has in trying to see like who can support Ovechkin's production. And I'm just not sure there's anyone. Like his shot rates were embarrassing. The shots that did come weren't terribly dangerous. Like I don't know. It would be a shame to say it's over. But I don't know. Like I'm now looking through like the free agent forwards and seeing like because I feel like Washington will spend what they need to spend, even if they're not competing, just to get Ovechkin the goals record. I think the question will be like, who can they convince to come and just be next to Ovechkin when he sets the goals record, rather than actually compete?
Pretty appealing to like be part of history
to
like
be,
that.
yeah, like you'll be in a highlight that's played like forever. So
by the way, 41 goals behind. It's like probably won't do it next year, but I feel like it's very reasonable to expect he could score, 20, 21 in 2 straight seasons. So I think this record is getting broken if he's healthy.
Okay.
Not to jinx him.
So I'm gonna go through some like free agents, okay? And I want you to
Sean
tell
Monahan.
me if they would sign. Yeah. So like, well, actually, I was thinking of the Winnipeg guys, like Monahan and Toffoli. Seemed like Washington could just sign both of those guys, play them with Ovechkin, and see what happens, right? Like that could be an upgrade. I mean, not that Dylan Strome has been chopped. Like he's been okay, and TJ Oshie's been like there's okay guys, but who could be better? Like Elon, I'm looking at Marchessault, I'm looking at Duchesne, but like these are guys coming from winning teams. They're not going to want to go nowhere. Elias Lindholm.
I mean, Matt Duchene, for enough money, maybe he'll do it. I don't know. I don't know these people. Yeah, maybe. No, I don't know. It's too hard for me to like. I don't know
like,
them, right?
Well, no, I'm just like it's a fun thought. It's a fun thought because, like we don't consider Washington to be an appealing. Like it's kind of a wasteland right now, right? It's not an appealing UFA destination by the conventional measures, but there is this one thing that might make like, and a team in their position would not spend. They'd be like, let's tank, let's forget it. We'll see in 6 or 7 years. But there's a different like dynamic here. So
it's going to be very interesting.
Yeah.
By the way,
Tarasenko. I feel like Tarasenko could end up there.
Tarasenko feels a little bit washed to me. I know we got a
but today. What better could they do?
I don't know. Well, someone who actually, just to continue ending the show on a down note, kind of sucks how things have turned out for Max Pacioretty, right? Like he came in like after being hurt. Like he used to be such a great volume shooter. Like clearly he's like a shell of his former self. He had 5 shots in the 4 games, like no impact in these playoffs after having barely any impact in the regular season. He's a UFA, of course. I wouldn't be surprised if Max Pacioretty announces a retirement. And again, this is like based on just looking at stats. Like I haven't followed closely what he's up to, but maybe he could sign a league minimum some year. Maybe he could sign a league minimum somewhere, but it seems like we're about at the end of the road for Pacioretty. This was not the exciting. Like I traded a 3rd round pick for him in my dynasty league, thinking like, I'll get it. He's Pacioretty. Like, yeah, he's injured, but once he's back, he'll hopefully be somewhat. But he was like nothing. Like I can't imagine. Even if he signs league minimum, I don't know if I'm going to hold on to him just to use up one of my roster spots.
Fair. I wonder if he like. I could see a couple scenarios. I could see him come back, play like for 3 weeks, or like go to camp and then be like, you know what? I think I'm done. I could see him playing like doing like Parisi did this year, which is like, oh, okay, I'll wait. I'll be a January signing. I'll join a team later on in the game. I'll get whatever. I'll work out in the meantime. Or maybe he'll just like sign a normal contract and have a normal year. I think there's a lot of like I'm not convinced he's done. But I don't know also what's going on with his body. And I also like have you seen any talk of him like in like the Washington Capitals like wrap ups or cleanups or whatever?
If Shams is still here, he can let us know.
Like I don't see anything.
I haven't
on
heard
game
much
day.
about him. No.
Yeah, Me neither. Like, there's just been, um, like all I'm seeing is articles about like the Caps losing in the playoffs. Like, it's crazy that they got to the playoffs. By the way,
Yeah,
maybe
it
I'm
would have
being
been
like
better
too
if
mean. Am I being
Pittsburgh.
too? Yeah. Oh, for sure. Or even like, well, Philly was kind of like
They were
crashing,
falling apart.
or
I think
Detroit.
Detroit or
Like,
Pittsburgh could have been
yeah,
fun.
I think they're teams that would have been more interesting. Like, yeah, and you know what? For their part, the Islanders did all right. All like Barzal, we didn't even talk about Barzal. He was good.
Yeah, I
He's
mean, he's
good.
Barzal. Not surprising. By
Yeah.
the way, I will say, I found an article right now from the Hockey News written by Sammy Silber, Caps beat reporter. Pacioretty said he hasn't thought about next steps yet, and said he's ultimately focused on returning to the form he was at before back-to-back torn Achilles. So sounds like he's not planning on retiring. And to be fair, he was recovering from that torn Achilles. He couldn't have his normal. That's like the thing you say, right? Like last summer, he didn't have his normal off-season training regimen. He was coming off his like terrible injury. So maybe if he's healthy now, he could actually like do a proper training, and maybe there is reason to expect that Pacioretty could still have something for next year. But on that note, Brian, we came in. I was talking to you yesterday. Like, what are we going to talk about on this podcast? I was like, we'll look at some playoff stuff. I'm sure there won't be that much to talk about. Next thing we know, 2 hours have gone by. It's been a blast. I could keep talking to you for longer, but I think we should probably call it here. So really fun getting back behind the mic with you. Thanks to everyone for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode. We're going to probably come back. Last year we did some episodes like a live draft of the KKPP third round. So maybe we can do something like that again. That was fun last year. Then, before we know it, we'll be in full off-season mode where we can do some really fun look backs on some other players on the season that had surprising results. And then we'll get, before we know it, into some trades and UFA and the draft. So, stay subscribed to Keeping Karlsson, and we'll keep trying our best to bring you the goods. Thanks so much to the patrons. I hope you had fun in the Keeping Karlsson playoff pool. Those of you who didn't make it past the first round, hope you enjoyed a couple of weeks. It's like, you felt like what it's like to be a Leafs fan. And you get a couple of weeks of fun, and then, you wait till next year. And for everyone who's still in there, good luck. We're still going to have a couple more rounds of drafts coming up pretty soon. We'll find out who's going to be the next ultimate Keeping Karlsson playoff pool champion. But anyway, if you want to get in on the fun with the patrons, still having a lot of fun in our Discord, and we're going to be starting mock drafts and all that stuff before you know it. So keepingkarlsson.com/patron for all that information of how to join our awesome community. But with that, Brian, let's cue the outro music. Why don't you read us the credits and take us out of here?
All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dobber Hockey and powered by our patrons, including our super supporters. Thank you for still being super for us. We really appreciate and all our supporters. But thanks especially to the perk you have earned for our super supporters to be named at the end of the show. Patty, Ricard, David, Ryan, Tom, Zach, Andrea, Sammy, Ivan, Philip, Aaron, Patrick, Brian, Jordan, Michael, Don, Roman, and Paul. Thank you. And actually, Paul just started being a super supporter, I think, the day the fantasy hockey season ended. So thanks. That's a really nice thing to do. So thanks.
Huh.
What else
Made
do I
up
say?
for all the people that left us. So that's nice.
Yeah, I don't know what to say to that. I was just saying something warm and fuzzy, and they're like, yeah, because everyone else sucks.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying thanks, Paul. It helps me feel good because I'm looking at the number of patrons, and I'm like, oh, the number's going down. It happens every year, of course. The number's going down, and then I was like, oh, but Paul came in.
Yeah,
super supporter.
Paul's our hero. You are the wind beneath.
Let's wrap this up.
Thank you to so Kevin, Elon, and I like to think that I am part of the team. Are working on this thing that Elon alluded to at the start of the show. I think it was on the YouTube or the actual. Anyway, it could change the way we play the cupful and make it better. And we're really excited. So we'll see where that goes. So thanks to Kevin for still doing amazing work, and he's a second-time father too. So congrats. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we've done a show since that happened.
And by the way, also huge thanks to Kevin for not only helping the Cupful, the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League during the season. He's also been huge help for helping run the Keeping Karlsson playoff pool.
Oh yeah,
and helping us get those drafts going each round. So yeah, Kevin's incredible.
And you too. You guys were burning the midnight oil.
Well, it's hard. You have one.
It is hard. It's a huge job.
one round ends, and then it's like the next round starts the same day. So we just had to like get those new drafts started, but you can't start the drafts until you find out who's advanced. So it was just like luckily for me, my daughter doesn't like to sleep, so I was up at like 3 a.m. anyways. So it was a perfect opportunity to finish putting those leagues together.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. Yahoo and the NHL needs to consult with us when setting their schedules.
Yeah, that was annoying.
Shams, speaking of continuing to contribute, Shams and you still keeping the info coming on GameDayTweets.com. This episode was researched. Oh, logo art by Brandon Weeb. Outro music by Pat Roach. This episode was researched with help from Dobber Hockey, Frozen Tools, Dobber Prospects, Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Cap Friendly, The Athletic, hockeygoalies.org, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects, and you know what? Game Day Tweets deserves a shout out here too. It should just be in the credits. So
Might
there
as
it
well.
is. Thanks, everybody.
If you were listening to the credits and you noticed the music stop and then like start sometime later, it's because like I'm thinking now, like we had a long credits here. I'm not gonna like get that music going the whole time, but yeah, the music is playing right now, so it's time for me to say once again for the final time, thanks for listening. We'll be back at you with another episode shortly. Brian, while we enjoy the rest of this second round of the playoffs and await our next Keeping Karlsson episode, anything you want to suggest that we do with our time?
Yeah, just keep doing all you can to make sure fantasy hockey is one of the rare things in this world that can be for everyone.
I like when you go rogue. I always wonder, like, is he gonna actually land this plane and like have a plan of where that sentence is gonna go? But that was great, eloquent, and perfect. So
Thanks.
thanks, pal. All right, this was fun. Thanks for anyone who decided to watch the live video or even watching it after the fact. I'm gonna go edit this thing. Great, that was fun. See ya. Bye, Brian.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Brian, hang out to make sure that it uploads the recording.
I know your
You know.
fear. It's a really tense 2.5 seconds.
Okay, we'll see how it goes. Bye, everyone.